Chapter 23: China's New Treasure Ships. The South China Sea dispute is also about trade itself. How China's extraordinary economic surge came about is the result of many things. But it would not have happened without a revolution that was born in the US port of Newark, New Jersey, a revolution in shipping that would change the map of global trade and prove transformative for the world economy and for China. The revolution was instigated by someone largely unknown in China and indeed the rest of the world, an entrepreneur from a small North Carolina town once known as Show Hill, yet Malcolm McLean, otherwise known as Idi Aminat McLean, is one of the most consequential figures of the history of transportation. Starting off with a tiny trucking company that he built into a major enterprise, McLean went to unleash the container revolution in world shipping that is the foundation of today's global economy. There is nothing romantic or flashy about a container. It is a steel box that might be 20 or 40 feet long and 8.5 or 9.5 feet high. As one author has written, it has no engine, no wheels, no sails. It does not fascinate those captivated by ships and trains and planes, or by sailors or pilots. It is just a metal box, but it has taken distance out of the economic equation by driving down transport costs to a fraction of what they had been, by speeding loading and unloading of ships, and by facilitating the easy movement of containers among ships and trucks and trains. By so doing, it turned manufacturing into a global rather than a local or regional business. Without this humdrum innovation, not interesting at all in the first sight, the business theorist Peter Drucker wrote, "The tremendous expansion of world trade, the fastest growth in any major economic activity ever recorded, could not possibly have taken place." McLean had never been on a ship. He just wanted to lower costs and save a few dollars moving his trucks from the East Coast down to Texas. The idea came to him when he had to wait in his truck while longshoremen laboriously moved cargo one piece at a time. As his frustration grew, he wondered, why not just lift the whole truck body in one go and move it over longer distance by ship? On April 2006, 1956, cranes at the port of Newark in New Jersey lifted up 58 truck bodies, minus their wheels and cabins, and put them on a surplus World War II tanker bound for Texas. We are convinced that we have found a way to combine the economy of water transportation with the speed and flexibility of overload shipment, McLean announced. This was the beginning. By the early 1960s, containers were becoming a real business. With McLean and his company and the lead, no longer did shipments have to be broken down into boxes and crates and sacks and hoisted around by hordes of longshoremen, taking up many days in port and adding substantially to costs. Instead, packed into containers, they could be lifted by cranes, with the operator high above in a cabin, and moved between shore and ship. The world of longshoremen that had been depicted just a couple of years earlier in 1954 film On the Waterfront was on its way out. In 1965, the first regularly scheduled container ships began to operate between the United States and Europe, but McLean had his eye on Asia, beginning with supplying US troops in Vietnam. that launched containerization into the Pacific Ocean. His next step was to detour ships on their way back from Vietnam, now empty of cargo, to Japan, to pick up containers filled with inexpensive goods destined to the US customers. Manufacturers in the Asian Tigers, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore followed suit. It was the spread of this innovation and the networks and systems that implemented it that integrated East Asia into the world economy. In 1980s, the year Deng began his reform. McLean initiated the first container service to China. 2 years later, the state-owned China Ocean Shipping Company launched container service to the west coast of the United States. China's rapid economic growth would not have been possible without the container fleet to carry its goods to global markets with very little additional cost. This applied both to goods manufactured in China and supply chains for which it was the hub. 7 of the world's top 10 container ports are Chinese, Shanghai, the largest, and China normally accounts for over 40% of the world's container shipments. Trade in turn is almost 40% of China's GDP, making that flow of exports outward and the flow of oil and other commodities inward essential for economic growth and indeed the foundations of political and social stability. Containerization became the backbone of global commerce. Yet, the full extent of both China's and world's dependence on containerization and the supply chains that rely on it really only became apparent when the coronavirus temporarily shut down much of the world trade in 2020. McLean died in 2001. On the day of his funeral, the shipping industry honored him worldwide. Container ships sounded their whistles to recognize the man who had done so much to unite together the global economy. In his obituary, the Journal of Commerce called containerization the most significant development in shipping since the shift from sail to steam power. For China, these container ships are China's 21st century Treasury ships, the true descendants of Zheng, his 15th century Great Fleet. They are the vessels that have carried China's economy into its current position in the global economy and world trade. This was chapter 23. Next one comes to talk about the test of prudence.